Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Gateshead College. Really good to see everybody on such a filthy afternoon here in south of the Tyne. We decided that we are not a Newcastle-centric organisation in the North East Ambulance Service, so we decided to come a little bit further south this year into Gateshead. I'm Peter Strachan, I'm the chair of the North East Ambulance Service. As I said, you are all very welcome this afternoon. It's really good to be back together face-to-face this year, having had our last annual members meeting and annual general meeting last 2 years actually on the virtual platform. So it is actually good to do it face-to-face and see some familiar faces and some not so familiar faces. So again, thank you very much for coming this afternoon. What we'd want to do this afternoon is just do some procedural things in terms of the agenda. I'll run through that in a moment, but just to take a moment to remind everybody that we are filming this session this afternoon. Hence, that's why I'm not wandering around in my usual fashion, being ad hoc and off the cuff. I'm using the microphone. And we will make the film available online through our platform for all those that want to see it afterwards. So just to remind colleagues that we are filming this afternoon. So, purpose of the meeting is to formally present to you the annual report and the accounts for the year that ended back on the 31st of March 2022. I will also reflect on some of the key highlights over that last 12 months. And I'll be asking Helen Ray, our Chief Executive, to take us through that a bit later on this afternoon, and also looking at the annual accounts with our Director of Finance, Kev Scully, a bit later too. I would just like to say on behalf of the board to say thank you to our teams. Thank you across the whole organisation for what has been another really outstanding and stellar performance in the face of continued adversity. Any of us who were naive enough to think that we would see demand falling away as COVID receded, we would have been mistaken. And our crews, both on the ground, in our emergency operations centre, our support teams, and right across the trust, do a fantastic job day in and day out. And I'd just like to acknowledge and recognise that here this afternoon. Okay, and in terms of the agenda, if I can take us to item 2 then on the agenda, declarations of interests. Are there any declarations of interest that colleagues would like to declare at the annual members meeting, annual general meeting here this afternoon? No? Thank you very much. That then takes us to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. This is a bit unusual, isn't it? Because normally we can just about remember what we did at the previous meeting, because it was about a month ago when we were looking at boards and committees. But actually it was 12 months ago. And I would just draw colleagues' attention to the minutes that are in the pack and asking for any matters of factual accuracy or any matters arising from the minutes that we held last year. No? Thank you very much. So, without a further ado, can I invite our Chief Executive, Helen Ray, to take us through the review of the year. Helen, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Peter. And just to say, from myself as well, welcome, especially to those of you who have struggled through the traffic and the diversions to get here. I know I kind of have been up a one-way street and back again. So thank you for making that effort for us today. Before we look back on 21 and 22 in detail, I just want to highlight a little bit about our trust strategy. So, despite COVID, we as an organisation are always very keen to make sure that we are moving forward. When you're operating in a crisis, it is very easy to stand still and just focus on the things that are in front of you at that moment in time. And whilst those are very important, and those things have been very important to us over the last couple of years, it is also our responsibility as a trust board and as an organisation to make sure that our strategic direction is set in such a way that we are able to deliver the very best that we can for our patients who need us and for our staff who work for us. So we launched our strategy in August 2021 and we called it our vision for the future. Lots of people do that, don't they? It provides a roadmap for the delivery to provide unmatched quality of care because we feel that that is what patients deserve. When we were developing it, we were thinking about the original mission, vision and values that we had already established a few years before. And actually what we found was that they held true for the time that we were in at that point and the time for us moving forward. Our vision is unmatched quality of care. Our mission is, of course, safe, effective and responsive care for everybody. Our values remain compassion, accountability and responsibility, respect and excellence in innovation, and they are at the heart of everything that we do. They shape our culture, they shape our decision making, and they ensure our ways of working are understood by everyone. So you should be able to see that running as a thread through our presentation today. The strategy is based around 4 ambitions, our P's and Q's, because we're a good Geordie group of people. That's people, partners, performance, and quality and safety, all absolutely centred around the needs of our patients. And as I go through the annual report and look back, and then look forward a little bit to 22-23, I'll refer to those P's and Q's and highlight the key developments and achievements in those areas. As we emerge from the pandemic, and hopefully we are on a good recovery route, we believe our strategy will give us a really solid place to start the process of recovering our services, supporting people, and addressing those challenges in what is a very difficult external environment. It's always good to see the year in numbers, isn't it? So I think it gives us, and you particularly, who aren't living and breathing this every day, an overview of us. So you can see we're a big organisation in terms of the money that we spend at £185 million. We have a vast area that we cover. So, almost 3,500 square miles that we travel and serve our population across there. We have 1,700 community defibrillators, and I specifically wanted to make note of those because they are supported so ably by our voluntary services and by our members of the public, because we know that early intervention, early bystander CPR saves lives, and we are very grateful for all of those councils, all of those churches, all of those community centres who host those defibrillators. I won't go through all of the numbers, but I think you can see it's been a very, very busy year. As Peter said, colleagues and volunteers right across our services in unscheduled and in scheduled care and in our corporate services have worked tirelessly to make sure that we are able to deliver the safest and highest quality of care possible. And I, as Peter has said, I'm very grateful to each and every one of them. We have 3,080 staff, 287 volunteers, and as I said earlier, we travel 13.8 million miles a year to make sure that we reach patients. That's a phenomenal number, isn't it, across our patch. More than 1,000 patients were treated and looked after by our little army of volunteers, and they provide an unmatched service like nothing else I've ever experienced in my long career in the NHS. And we are very grateful that they continue to give us that support. Without them, we would be in a much more challenging position. And we have, as I said, those 1,700 community defibrillators, which is fantastic. I wanted to touch a little bit on the money because, everywhere is pressured. The money is tight right across the NHS. But we did work right through the last year in making sure that our commissioners understood the requirements for NIAS in relation to our ability to start to address the gap between our capacity and the demand that was placed on our services. And I'm really pleased to say that they have invested in our service significantly over this year. That has allowed us to recruit 376 new employees into NIAS. And we're not done yet. We are still recruiting, and we will still continue to push for that investment until the service we provide is unmatched. Our operations centre has benefited hugely for those, and we made a conscious effort also to continue the learning and development of our staff throughout the pandemic. A number of organisations did stand that back because it does help you to create capacity for response. But if you disrupt the training and development of staff, you cannot say that you have the very best staff delivering service. So we were very clear that we wanted to continue with that and have done so. In terms of patient experience, we've seen what the numbers are telling us. And we have seen a deterioration in patient satisfaction over the course of the year. That is always going to be disappointing for us because we want everybody to have a really great service. We seek feedback because it is extraordinarily important to us. So when patients and their families are pointing out that things aren't as good as they would expect them to be, we listen to that. We listen to it actively and we respond and we act. We use every single person's concerns or complaint as a learning experience in our organisation. And because we are reliant on people, we recognise that we won't always get it right every single time. So learning and developing when we do get things wrong is the best that we can possibly do. The greatest cause of satisfaction, it won't surprise anybody in the room to know, is the waiting times. And obviously the investment piece that we have, that I've touched on earlier, will allow us to begin to address that. And we have already seen our call handling times reduce significantly as a direct result of the investment. So, a little bit more detail and to discuss some of our key achievements. So, COVID-19, there is no doubt about it, was the biggest challenge that we faced in 21-22. We kept getting a false dawn, didn't we, where we thought things were receding, but actually that false dawn never really materialised until very recently. So, we had to work within that confine to maintain those safe services. We operate under an escalation framework which is called REAP. And that consists of 4 levels of escalation. So if you are operating in REAP level 1, everything feels as though it's running smoothly. 1 or 2 we would like to see is our natural state. So you will always have a little bit of busyness. But NIAS entered into REAP level 4, our very highest level of escalation, in July 21, and we did not de-escalate from that level until January 22. That was a very challenging position to find ourselves in. It is unprecedented within our service, and I think it's fair to say that all ambulance trusts within our country were operating at that level during that period of time. So I'm sure you will understand that that was a very challenging period for us. So the thousands of staff, students and volunteers kept us safe, as I've said earlier, through this period. We also, because we were operating under such pressure, had to really consider the health and well-being of our staff. That is a real key priority for us. Social distancing, digital meeting tools, flexible working and agile spaces are just some of the ways that the work that we did to change the working through that year. In 2021, we launched our health and wellbeing group, and we secured some funding for some additional staff to support that, because it has to be active, it has to be immediate when we want to support our staff. And we also introduced a successful measure called our welfare car. And most of the board members who are in the room today have had experience of being out on the welfare car to provide drinks and something to eat to staff when they are at their busiest and unable sometimes to get the breaks that actually they so readily deserve. And we have enjoyed that because it has kept us connected to the staff in a very constructive way, and allowed us to show our support to them, both as a senior team and throughout all of the teams who have supported the welfare car. We also had some really honest conversations during that year with our staff about what they needed to perform well in their roles. What we think and what they think can sometimes be a little bit apart. So listen, my mum always used to say, Helen, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And that's so you listen twice as much as you speak. Doesn't always work for me, I have to say. But we did have very honest conversations with our staff, and we are committed to ensure that we continue to support them during 22-23. The Board of Directors for 21-22 approved 3 quality priorities, and we've made really good progress in relation to those, although that again has been a challenge, and some of those will be expanded on later in the presentation. And this year really brought home, I think, for us, the partnership approach that is in place across the North East and Cumbria. We can't stand alone as NEAS. We rely on our partners to work closely with us, and by God, they rely on us, because we interface with every single organisation, every single acute provider, every single mental health trust. We integrate and interface with our local authority colleagues, and we're probably the only organisation that fits over the full footprint, easy for me to say, of the North East. And obviously Cumbria is part of that integrated care system as well, but our counterparts in the North West Ambulance interface there, although we have very good relationships with the North West Ambulance Service Trust. So an understatement to say that it's been a challenging year for us all. And, you know, I just wanted to say thank you as well to our NESUS colleagues. So we have a wholly owned subsidiary organisation in NEAS, and they provide our fleet services. They literally keep the show on the road for us. So I just wanted to mention them as a core element of the things, the services that have been provided and the support that we have had. So delivering outstanding performance every single time is what we aspire to. And I think it's safe to say that we haven't been able to deliver all of that in year. And that's always going to be disappointing. I could wax lyrical about the reasons for that, of course. But what our job is to make sure that we understand the reasoning and that we're starting to do something about it. So we worked really hard over the year to make sure that we were able to do that. We answered 1.2 million calls through our 999 and 111 service in our EOC, and we transported over 250,000 patients to hospital. But that is only 20% of the calls. And we have done a really great job. When I say we, I really mean the clinicians, of course, in our hear and treat, which allows us to deal with the patient on the call, get them the support that they need without the need to send an ambulance and without the need for that patient to go to hospital. And in our see and treat, where actually our ambulance will be dispatched, but will treat the patient at home or in their usual place of residence, so that only the patients who really need it are seen at hospital. That was very important through COVID, because we were asking and telling patients that they were unable on many occasions to go with their loved ones, to hold their hand and to take care of them, and that will have been very painful. So minimising our transportation to hospital was very important during that period of time. In our Category 1 response time, and Category 1 is 7 minutes for those patients who are the most critically ill. They are active cardiac arrests or very serious injury through road traffic accident. And the response requirement for that is 7 minutes. And you'll see, although we didn't meet that target, we still were the second best performing trust for those C1 conditions in the country. And that's some feat, considering what we were facing through the year. But we know we must do better, and we will continue to do that. So this is how we are performing over a short period of time, over a few years period. And the reason I wanted to really pop this slide up was just to show that despite the challenges that I've been talking about and that Peter touched on, we have continued to improve across all of those measures. And that is because we are tenacious in our approach. We know that that response time means the difference for a patient between potentially having a life-changing event and us getting the patient to the right care so that is avoided. So we will continue to be tenacious in that, despite the pressures. And we still remain the second best performing trust across the national average in all categories. And it's pertinent to note that actually the category 1 90th centile, which is 90% of time for reaching a patient, only 4 trusts in the whole country met that standard, which is really quite an awful thing to have to stand up and say, but is a reality in the pressures that we have been facing. And this is what it looks like in colour. I know it's a bit hard for people necessarily to see from where you are sitting, but actually what this shows is that now we continue to perform well against other ambulance services. But the fact that those bars, with the exception of one, are all red means that we still have more to do. We have higher than average conveyance rates, so transportation to hospital, and we're doing some work to reduce that, and we recognise that as a challenge. But we are clear, absolutely, that recovery of ARP, which has been a really big issue for us during the year that we've just closed, needs a combination of both our work and our partners. And we work closely with our partners to make sure that is delivered. So in respect of that, the headline stuff at the minute in the press is all talking about handover delays. They've featured heavily throughout 21-22, and we saw a huge increase, as did most other organisations. We had a 108% increase in the numbers of hours that we lost due to ambulances waiting for handover at hospital A&E departments. But I want to be very clear that we are not blaming the hospitals for that. The hospitals are in equally a difficult position to us in relation to their ability to move patients through their facilities. And we know that our colleagues right across our local authorities are struggling to be able to cope with the demand placed on them, either to keep patients safe in their own home or to take patients who require an additional level of care out of hospital. So that is a system requirement. We have to work closely together. Handover delays, to me, are a big indicator of a system under pressure. And the pressures that we are experiencing are not unique to us. I'm sure you'll have seen today, some of you, in the news that the Secretary of State for Health, our new Secretary of State, has indicated her A, B, C, D, and A is ambulances. And actually, we're quite pleased that we're at the top of the agenda, because that means that it's, the work that we've done during 21-22 has been listened to, and the work that we have to do will be supported. So we've helped by seeing some changes to the way we work with our AD partners, and we continue to have a transformation agenda with them, particularly those that are feeling most challenged, to help improve the flow of patients within their AD. And we expect to see further improvements during 22-23, because we don't want to retain the number 2 spot that we've got. Actually, we want to gain the number 1 spot during the course of the coming year. I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the most important things that we do, which is maintaining quality and safety. Safe, compassionate and inclusive care for everyone. I referenced a little bit earlier the quality priorities, and I'm just going to take you through those in a little bit more detail. So we set ourselves 3 quality priorities for 21-22, and the quality report, which some of you might have seen and is available obviously freely through our web pages, outlines the progress against those priorities. But it also recognises where we weren't able to achieve all of the key actions that we had planned, because we were prioritising the most important thing, which was patient care. We will, however, ensure that the outstanding actions are completed in the year ahead. I'm really proud of the progress that we did make in the face of those unprecedented challenges. In regard to our first quality priority, our aim was to ensure we have really robust processes to manage the identification of those patients who are deteriorating, getting sicker over a very short period of time, and how we could care for them efficiently and effectively. We planned to reduce the number of patients who were suffering harm or a deterioration in their condition while they waited for an ambulance by identifying those patients at greatest risk at the earliest opportunity and escalating them to the most appropriate person or source of service for their treatment. We updated what we call our clinical safety plan to identify and allocate resources as safely as we possibly could to the sickest patients during those really difficult periods of demand. But we know there are still further improvements to be made, and we continue to review and adapt those processes, including the use of our digital systems, to support our AOC teams to achieve this priority. We know that patients waited too long for care in 21-22. We know that patients continue to wait too long currently, and our ambition and our priority has to be to close that gap. Our second quality priority was to improve the cardiac arrest outcomes for our communities. It is very well known that survival for patients who are experiencing a cardiac arrest is dependent on receiving treatment in a very short period of time. Early recognition and access to that treatment, early cardiopulmonary resuscitation and early defibrillation are all key to survival. And I mention again our community public access defibrillators. We work with the British Heart Foundation to map the location of every single defibrillator in the North East area so we can automatically populate our control room, and when a 999 call comes in that requires CPR, the advice from our health advisors is immediate, and there is coaching from them so that members of the public can commence that bystander CPR. We're very grateful that people step forward to do that. If you haven't learned CPR, please do so. Our third quality priority was to ensure that patients receive the best end-of-life care and a calm and peaceful death in their preferred place of care, wherever that was possible. On one occasion this year, we were asked to transfer a patient who wanted to visit home prior to them going into St Oswald's Hospice for their last days. The patient wanted to see his home and his friends for one last time because they were unable to visit due to their own limiting health conditions. Our dispatch managers and our St John's ambulance team worked together to ensure that that patient's wishes were fulfilled. A great example of where our staff go the extra mile, particularly for people who are at end of life and absolutely deserve the very best compassionate care we can give. And we'll continue to work with our stakeholders across the region to ensure that that dignity is afforded to every patient. So we've outlined 4 quality priorities as we move forward into 22-23. Working with our system to reduce handover delays, learning from incidents, and preparing for PSURF. And PSURF is the new process and system that we will be using for patient safety incidents. That is a national system with a timeline set, and the team are working really hard to make sure that we are able to meet that. Using our resources to make the very best use of our clinical model. So what I really mean by that is being as efficient as we possibly can be. So, you know, we can look outward at what others can do for us, but we should always be looking inward to say, actually, how do we help ourselves? How do we become the most efficient that we possibly can be within our own organisation? And involving our patients and communities to improve care. It's really important to listen to people, listen to our patients. And we have had some great examples of that. But we do know that actually, through the difficult periods of COVID, that has lapsed somewhat. And we need to pick up the thread of that and make sure that we are working with our patient groups, our health watch teams and others to make sure that we are listening to the requirements of care that the patients need, not what we potentially might think they need. These qualities align with the NHS England and NHS Improvements quality indicators this year. And the operational guidance, we considered the CQC domain within that and have placed them in our trust strategy for 21 to 26. So we're able to undertake a little period of consultation with internal and external stakeholders to allow us to shape that. So that helps us to ensure that the priorities as we move forward are reflecting the needs of the patients, the needs of our staff, and that our partner organisations and our business partners across the region understand and are able to work with us. That relates back to our P's and Q's that I mentioned earlier. So we'd be nowhere, would we, without the people who run our services on our behalf. I always think as Chief Executive that, the paramedics could probably walk in and do a bit of my job, but by God, I couldn't walk in and do theirs. And I couldn't do the call handler's job. And I couldn't do the volunteer's job that they do in many cases. So it is really important that we look after and care for our people. So in 21, 22, as we moved into recovery phase, we were thinking about our people plan. And again, it aligns to the NHS People Promise, which is a national promise made by NHS England. Our route map has 7 themes. I won't pull them all out, but I'll just talk about a few. It's really important that we are compassionate and inclusive. We've invested in a positive action officer to reach our communities, and although that project is just in its first year, it is amazing what they have done. We have engaged with 96 community organisations that support ethnic minority communities. And we have had a targeted approach in that respect because we know that those communities have less access, find it more difficult to get into health provision, and also are not as aware of things like bystander CPR. So that has been really valuable for us. We've trained over 1,000 people in CPR, defibrillation and service awareness. And we've delivered service awareness training through 63 workshops. We've been practically able to re-engage in community events where people can see us, they can talk to us, and it was great to be part of the Mela, part of Pride and part of school visits during the course of 21-22. And in the RES data, we were identified in the top 10 NHS trusts against a number of those indicators. So applicants appointed from shortlisting and staff believing that the trust provides equal opportunities for career development are particularly important to us if we want to be an all-inclusive organisation. We are recognised and rewarded as an organisation, and we recognise and reward our staff as appropriate as we possibly can. So we've had some mechanisms put in place. We have our thank you awards, and we've run those virtually, and our communications team have worked ably behind the scenes to allow that to happen. We've done some thank you gifts for our staff, and that might not feel like much, but something received in your home with a personal letter that says you are valued actually does mean something to each and every individual. We continue to strive to be safe and healthy, and we have multiple avenues of support, including a very well established and very good occupational health team. We've introduced a peer support programme for staff members who feel that they need support, and that can be particularly after a very difficult case, and sometimes that might be immediate. but sometimes that might be months or years later, where staff feel triggered by something and want to seek help. And we're looking forward to some of the evaluation attached to that very soon. And we are always learning. That essential training that I mentioned earlier has continued. Our first cohort of 20 student paramedics commenced their degree level apprenticeship in September 21, and they are all internal colleagues from a range of departments. It's fantastic to be able to support internal growth for our teams. We could have filled those places 10 times over at least. So we are ambitious to grow and develop that further. We also opened a really great new education facility in the Team Valley in May 21, continuing to show our staff that we want to invest in their future. And soon our immersion suites will come into place, which will allow us to give students the most real-life experiences in a safe educational setting. We've got some great staff in our education team, and we're very proud of our ability to continue with that. And we talk about being one team. A small group across the organisation worked really tirelessly on that to make sure that wherever we're talking about ourselves, we are talking about each other and we are talking about a single team. And we will continue to be able to push for that over the coming year. I think I've probably covered that, going a bit ahead of myself. So it's nice to see what our people say. It's okay me standing up and telling you, you know, things that I think staff will say, but actually we've drawn out some of those things that actually mean something to our staff. Some of these faces will be familiar to you, I think, from the ambulance programme if you've been watching them. So Becca joined NIAS in 2016, straight out of school. She feels as though she's proven that you don't need to go to university from school to succeed in life. Something I would absolutely echo. Someone else, Laurie, has said, I've moved to NIAS because there's lots of opportunities available to me. You can start as a health advisor and end up as a paramedic. There's so much available for me to be able to progress if I work for it. And that's crucial, isn't it? Olivia, to be able to do this job role requires patience and empathy. Olivia works in our emergency operations centre. It's really important not to discount any patient, even when you've had a few hard hours of work. We need to think quickly but decisively and be confident. And Sammy says, I don't want anyone to feel the way I felt. And that's why I do the job. Coming to work helps my mental health because I know I'm making a difference. I'm making a difference from when I was in that position, when I wanted someone else to help me. And we've got lots of those from our staff. So I'll just end with Adam. So I thought this was really nice. After watching the series of BBC Ambulance, it wasn't our series, so thanks to NWAS, I think, for getting us Adam to come to work with us. I thought the job of a health advisor looked really rewarding. So as soon as the job was advertised, I applied. And we have seen lots of applicants on the back of people seeing just what the service does and what it provides. And here they are. We already know how amazing our staff are. We talk about it all the time internally. But I'm so pleased that the wider public has been able to see that, to be able to see the compassion, the dedication and the professionalism firsthand. I can't tell you how proud I am when I switch on that television on a Thursday and see our staff performing at their very best. I think they're amazing. I hope you do too. So our partnership approach, as I said earlier, we're part of the North East and North Cumbria ICS and work closely with acute services, primary care, social care, local authorities, mental health colleagues to deliver the best integrated care for patients, the best at the point of time that they need it. We're fully aligned to the ICS footprint, and we've had to change the way we work as this new ICS has come into place, and we've restructured our operations teams to make sure that those that are highlighted, I have to turn around because my slides aren't in colour, in the 2 blues and the green, in the green, the blue and the purple, they're our areas, our integrated care partnerships. We have aligned our teams to them as far as we possibly can be, because we understand that across our patch we face rural challenges, we face coastal challenges, and we face urban challenges, and they are very different. So aligning our staff into the integrated care partnerships will help us to be as effective as we possibly can as partners. We've been proactive in finding solutions to the urgent care system, including, for example, making sure that where an organisation is pressured, where an ambulance, and starting to queue the ambulances, we will negotiate with other organisations to say we need to take a little bit of pressure off. We need to move the things around a little bit. Still try to get the patients to the closest possible emergency department for their need. But sometimes we do move patients a little bit further afield to make sure that they are seen as quickly as their condition demands. And our board recently has agreed to sign up to the North East and North Cumbria Provider Collaborative via a formal memorandum of understanding. And we have established a North East Ambulance Service Strategic Transformation Board. And that's important because what that allows us to do is feed directly into the Integrated Care Board and make sure that we have a strong voice now and into the future to make sure that NEAS, as one of the smaller organisations on the patch, doesn't get overlooked or forgotten about. I'm sure you'll know that we are very passionate about making sure that doesn't happen. So some good examples of partnership working. We have a community pathways team, and they will help navigate patients through the system to the right place. We work with UKSAR. Don't ask me what those initials stand for, because actually I can't remember. I'm sorry for putting those initials in when I can't remember what they are. To reduce ambulance conveyance. Stephen will know better than I do. We work with Northumbria Trust on their validation. We have first contact practitioners, community paramedics, a paramedic model in Berwick to support primary care. And that's a really great example of where in our most rural economies, our most rural populations, where we can work very closely with our primary care colleagues, with the urgent care centres run by the Trust, and with our paramedics to make sure that we are moving forward in a most productive way and avoiding that really long journey that is between Berwick and Northumbria services wherever we possibly can in a safe way. And we are implementing a single version contact centre with our Yorkshire Ambulance Service colleagues as well. And again, I've mentioned already that we are doing work with Handover Delays at South Tees. And I think at this point, I'm going to take a short break and I'm going to hand you over to Kev, who's going to talk through the financial picture. Thanks, Kev.
Thanks, Helen. So from a financial perspective, 21-22 was quite a positive financial year. We managed to deliver on our financial obligations. We managed to continue to invest in our services from a revenue perspective, and we also managed to continue to invest from a capital perspective as well. So just putting a few numbers on that for people. We reported to NHS England a £2.9 million surplus last financial year. That's a little bit higher than what you will see in our annual accounts, and that's because of some technical adjustments in terms of how we report things out. However, the important thing is there that we've reported what was expected of us as an organisation. We have a really good news story to tell in terms of our income. So we have retained around £37 million worth of income from 1920. So we've seen a significant investment and a continued investment by working closely with our commissioners, which is enabling us to invest in our service from a revenue perspective. We also invested around £6.6 million in capital, which for us basically means refreshing our vehicles and our updating our estate. So from an infrastructure perspective, we continue to invest in our service from that perspective as well. From an external audit perspective, our external auditors are Mazars, and they provided us with an unqualified and unmodified opinion. So our accounts present a true and fair representation of the financial story for the Trust for 21-22, and they identified no significant weaknesses in our value for money assessment as well. So from a deployment of resources perspective, we're doing what we should do in terms of the rules that government outlined for us. What does that mean for us going forward? So in the round, essentially delivering a good set of financial results for 21-22 and delivering a clean audit puts us in a really strong place for 22-23 and beyond. So we can continue to invest in our services, as Helen's already outlined, and that should give us enough headroom with which to transform our services so they remain fit for purpose for the future, as well as being sustainable. And at that point, I think I'll hand over to Helen, who will tell you all about our exciting transformation programme.
Oh, Kev, you've given us too many slides now. Just get rid of them. So just looking ahead now into 22-23 and delivering transformation. So as I said earlier, we'll continue to work with our partners, but it's really important that we make sure that internally our plans are transformational, they are the best that they can be, and that we are delivering great quality care, but also great value for money. It's taxpayers' money that we're spending at the end of the day. It's money out of your pockets. So you want to make sure, I'm sure, that we spend that wisely. So our key priority for 22-23 is to transform, and these are our big ticket work programmes. We're confident that these are the right ones. We thought a lot about what we could and should do. There's multiple programmes of work that we could have chosen, but we think that these will allow us to move on our journey. So working through our operations centre to make sure that the investment that we have managed to secure gives us the most efficient services, that we really scrutinise any opportunity to trim things, to make sure that the process is as short as possible and as quick as possible when someone dials 999 or 111, so we can immediately pick up the phone and help and support. The community response is important for us, very important, because when we, either through a call or through a visit to a patient in their home or place of residence, identify that actually the best thing that the patient could have is some wraparound support, or a really quick appointment with their GP, or a form of diagnostic, we need to make sure that we are able to access those without having to transport the patient to hospital for the hospital to have to deal with that. So we are very keen to open up what we call our directory of service, so that we have more rapid access to those. And just today I was talking to one of my colleagues and one of the chief operating officers alongside Stephen around how we might work with primary care in one of our patches in a different way to allow us to do that. We are undertaking a review of our scheduled care services. So scheduled care, primarily those services that will transport patients to their outpatients or into hospital and back out again. But they also provide us with some urgent care support on a very frequent basis. So we just want to do the very best that we can and be as efficient, as effective as we possibly can in scheduled care. And both the emergency operations and the scheduled care programmes have started with a full week's rapid process review last week, with the staff coming together to put their ideas on the table, because we will succeed if we build that up from the bottom, not from the top. And our staff have told us very clearly that they're not happy with their working patterns. They don't like the relief rotas, they don't like the way annual leave works, and they don't like the way the rotas work currently for them. And as we are able to come out and really focus on those, we have made a commitment to our staff that we will review all of those in year. And in fact, we've already made some significant changes to the first part of that, which is the annual leave process for them. And those programmes will be enabled through culture and through communication. Communicating over 3,500 square miles with multiple thousands of staff is a challenge. So we work constantly to understand how we do that, how we can do it better for patients, and how we can do that better for our staff too. So we're developing a new clinical model, an operating model in partnership with staff and stakeholders. We will continue our performance journey on our ambulance response time, using our investment to make sure that we are tracking that vigorously, so that the investment piece is actually doing what it says on the tin. You know, you don't get an investment of the magnitude that we have without the commissioners wanting to hold you to account for the delivery. That's absolutely right. So we have a very robust tracking mechanism in place to make sure that, you know, where we are on track, we continue. Where we deviate from that place, that we understand it and we put things in mitigation to make sure we'll get back on it. Delivering our strategic objectives and quality priorities. I'm hoping that the winter doesn't detract too much for us in that respect, but we do know that it's going to be tough. I don't think anybody in health is standing on the cusp of winter thinking it's going to be easy. It's going to be significantly challenging. But our job, as I said right at the beginning, is to make sure that we deal with those day-to-days and those emergency priorities, but we also keep a focus on where are we headed as an organisation. We need to obtain that as a recurrent financial settlement beyond 22-23, and we'll do that through supporting some of those drives and efficiencies. We want to play an active leadership role in our integrated care system, and we want to align some of our priorities moving forward to health inequalities. It's a little bit hard to understand where the Ambulance Trust plays into that. But if you remember the detail of the numbers that I talked about and the numbers of connections and interfaces we have with patients, which is in its millions, there must be something we can do to support the health inequalities agenda. And we and all of our Ambulance Trust colleagues are exploring that in a great level of detail. And lastly, and it would be remiss of me not to mention this, you will all be aware that the Trust is under some significant scrutiny currently. So we've just completed our Care Quality Commission assessment. That was tough. When you're coming out of the pandemic and you are in a recovery phase, and you as an organisation, we as an organisation, recognise that not everything is where it should be and where it could be, the CQC will certainly tell us that. They probably won't tell us anything we don't recognise ourselves, but we are looking forward to the report, which will not happen until probably November this year, and we'll use that as a learning opportunity, and we will grasp things that we are asked to do and move forward with them positively. We also have an independent review on the back of whistleblowing allegations that were made in May, so I just wanted to say that openly. We will work closely again with the independent reviewer, and if there are lessons for us to learn from that, which there undoubtedly will be when someone else looks at your systems and processes, they can always put a fresh set of eyes on that, and isn't that good? You know, we've got to just say that that is positive. You know, it's not a positive place to be, but we will look at that positively and take the learning forward. And we're also one of 5 ambulance trusts who are participating in the National Guardian's Office review of freedom to speak up. So important, isn't it, that staff feel comfortable where they see things are happening and they have concerns. It's important for them to be able to speak out. And our current freedom to speak up guardians, who are amazing in our organisation, will be working closely with the National Guardian's Office to see what the sector, NIAS and the wider ambulance sector, can learn about from some of our colleagues across the patch. So strong foundations for the future is where I think we are, although still in a challenged place. Robust relationships across our ICS footprint that we work on. A strong position on call handling at the beginning of winter. That is really important for us. I'm so grateful to the teams who have worked hard on making sure that the recruitment strategy worked well for us, so that we are in a good position in relation to being able to respond to patients. We haven't got to forget that actually we've done some great stuff. So in terms of our accreditation, we were rated good by Ofsted for our education, and that's tough. We were talking to about that internally. And, you know, you're nervous when Ofsted come to visit you. Those of you who've worked in education will appreciate that. So we've got some award-winning teams that we can build on. We've got a single transformation plan that I've outlined. We've agreed that with our commissioners. We've got a strong trust board that takes a measured approach to risk and innovation. We're living in a risky environment, and we have to be bold, brave, but sensible when we're taking decisions about where does the money go, what do we do next. And I am grateful to my board colleagues for the support that they offer into our organisation in balancing that risk really well. I've said we've got the opportunity to learn from the independent review, the CQC and the Freedom to Speak Up review. We're working with partners on some really innovative pilots that I think will stand NIAS out amongst its peers and show what can be done if you really focus and put your mind to it. And we're embedding some of those new services, such as the Berwick Community Paramedic Model, and we measure that, and we will use that to show our partners just how positive a frame NIAS can hold itself in. And we'll maintain our strategy into the future. I talked about that at the beginning, around keeping the patient at the centre of everything that we do. That is the most important thing to us as an organisation. And our drive and ambition will always be to give every single patient who needs our care and support the very best that we possibly can. Thank you very much. And I think we'll take questions.
Thanks, Helen and Kev. Thank you very much indeed for a very comprehensive run-through of the year that we have just had. As Helen said, this is the question and answer session. We're very happy to throw it open to the floor. Can I just ask that if you have a question, that you wait and receive the microphone so that we can hear everything that's being asked and that we can hear that on the recording as well. So could I take the first question, please? We've got lots of executive directors and non-executive directors here to answer questions. So Anne, to you please first.
Bearing in mind the increased cost of fuel and stuff like that, and the prospect of having a possible COVID re-emergence, possibly a bad flu year, possibly a bad winter, because the last couple of winters haven't been too bad, the pressure, especially on vulnerable people, is going to be enormous. And I can imagine having more cases of hypothermia, more cases where people are being getting poor nourishment, so they're more vulnerable to things. How on earth are you going to cope with that?
I think a very good and relevant question. Helen was not over-dramatising, I think, when you said it's going to be a tough winter. It's going to be a tough winter anyway, and I think, Anne, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head in terms of the extra pressures that people will find. So I think, Helen, can I go to you first, please, and answer to that?
Thanks, Anna. And, you know, we absolutely 100% agree with you. We are worried about that. We're worried about the wider population, of course, and the financial pressures that are brought to bear. We are very concerned, for example, that people will switch their heating off, will not switch their heating on, and those cases of hypothermia and other things are likely to come to the fore. One of the actions that has already been taken across the Integrated Care Board is that we have proactively, through our ICB Chief Executive, Sam Allen, Sam has written to Ofgem already on behalf of our communities to ask them how they are going to manage that and make sure that those with clear vulnerabilities are both identified and supported to ensure that despite the great financial challenges and the fuel prices, They are not, for example, cut off and therefore need to, reside in hospital for warmth and food. That would be clearly unacceptable to us. As NEAS, we have a very robust winter plan, again, that we put together with our partners, and that is considering all of those aspects. It goes to everybody's boards through the course of October and November. But what we do as a system collectively, because obviously we're just a small part of that bigger system, we do a check and balance across all of those plans for all providers to make sure that they, A, don't trip each other up, and B, are offering the right levels of support given the current challenges that we have. And we include in there mental health as well as physical health, because we do know that the pressures that people are facing won't just impact their physical well-being, but could also impact their mental health well-being. So we don't have a silver bullet. I wish I did. But we do have some really good plans in place to make sure that, A, we recognise that, and B, we are doing everything that we can to prevent both individuals and communities suffering.
Thanks, Helen. Next question from the floor. Can I ask one then? Is that Chair's prerogative to ask a question? Just really interested, Helen and probably Kev, in terms of the additional investment that we've secured from the Commissioners. I think you touched on how some of that will be deployed. Can you maybe just give us a little bit more detail about what we will see outside on the road, what we'll see in the Emergency Operations Centre, and how that will really be directed towards our patient care, please? Helen,
Yeah,
do you want to go first?
I'm happy to start, and then I maybe ask Stephen if he wants to say anything. So the initial investment has gone, rightly, as I said earlier, into our Emergency Operations Centre call handlers, because we know that the quicker we pick up the phone, the quicker we can make an assessment and get a dispatch ambulance if that is what's required. The next stage will be to invest in our clinical advisory service. So they are the people who sit behind the Emergency Operations Centre team, who you will know are not clinicians. They are working on an algorithm, but they will have additional advice from the clinical advisory service teams to be able to make the best decision possible for to direct the patient to the care that they need in the quickest way. And we will also be investing in, my numbers might not be quite right, but 10, I think, additional ambulances with the corresponding paramedical teams within that across the patch. But we have to wait for the universities to put out their next set of newly qualified paramedics, and then we'll grab them with both hands and put them into the new vehicles. So we will see additional vehicles on the road. I don't know if you want to add anything, Stephen.
I wish I could remember the numbers off the top of my head. I can't, unfortunately.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Helen. Any other questions from the floor? Stephen at the back. Thank you. If you just wait for the microphone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Stephen Gwillam. I'm representing Durham County Council. I support their Health Scrutiny Committee. The question I've got's really around the 111 service, and it touches a little bit on the investment that you've just referred to. A lot of access to services now is being filtered through the 111 service, and it would be remiss of me on behalf of my committee and councillors not to refer to issues that they get fed through to them from constituents around the length of time taken to answer 111 calls, aborted calls, and also the ability or whether the current, you've referenced the directory of services, is actually fit for purpose and reflects the actual services that are available to refer into in all of the various localities across the region. And a second point of that, really interested in the Berwick service that's been referenced today, because I think a lot of, again, elected representatives in the more rural west of County Durham would look to the Berwick model as something that, with some degree of envy, in terms of the distance that people from the Upper Dales have to travel to access emergency services, or indeed, you know, urgent care services.
Thank you, Stephen. I think a really good couple of questions, actually, and very, very relevant to where we have been in the last 12 months. I think, you know, as a board, we were particularly concerned about the 111 demand, first of all, and how we were able to respond to that. And I think one of the things that we have done particularly well is to pick up the baton on that and do some quite innovative things in responding to that particular challenge. But maybe I could let Stephen just take us through that and what we propose to do in terms of rolling out the Berwick, what was a Berwick pilot, a bit further. Steve.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question. I think one of the big challenges that we came with COVID and the pandemic is that 111 became the default for everything. And I think that challenge in terms of having the numbers of staff to be able to answer the call really did push the boundaries in terms of us being able to do that, and the staff did a marvellous job. However, the length of time that people were waiting was not where we would want it to be. Obviously, part of the investment money was to improve the 111 service as well. It wasn't, we run an integrated call handling function so that we answer both 999 and 111 calls, and we split the workforce and we flex it to be able to respond to the demand based on that priority. We have, through the investment and the recruitment program that we've put in through the winter, we've improved our 111 call handling now. We're down into single-figure minutes in terms of our call handling time. In fact, we've had some recent times where the 111 service was, because of the training that's been provided and the way it's being staged through, is actually performing better than the 999 service at some points, which is a frustration, but nevertheless, it does make a significant contribution. So the 111 service is on a good footing, and you know, I'm confident that we won't see the abandonment rates that we were seeing through a lot of the call handling demand. I think a big part of that I need to touch on as well is around availability of general practice. It's around availability of other services that are not as responsive, dentistry, as well as primary care availability is stretched, and therefore, again, the default position is that it comes through to 111. So 111 is very much becoming a default go-to service for an urgent need that can't be met somewhere else. And I think that touches on the how we work with those other services and how we link in through the DOS. So some of those services that are profiled, are they profiled in the right way? Are they actually available at the times that we need them to be available? And that's all work that we are taking through the transformation strategy board that Helen mentioned in terms of how do we improve that. So I think that we're on a journey of recovery with 111. However, I think that NIAS and our position and working with the commissioners, and we certainly had a call this morning where we're being innovative around what we can contribute as that single point of contact. You know, I think there's more for us to do in terms of being able to organise services and coordinate patients' need to the service that they require for their need at that moment in time. That sounds simple, but actually across the NHS is very, very complex, and being able to access those services at the right time, getting the appointments, for example, in additional GP provision is actually really complex. But we're cued into that, and it's part of the transformation programme, and so a lot of that is around identification of need. In terms of the next steps, so the Berwick model is held up as a shining light. I think that actually what we need to do is that needs to become pretty much our default way that we deal with specialist practitioners who are able to respond in an urgent nature. So that's regardless of rurality. You know, the travel in urban areas, it's easier to travel, but the timeliness is better. But the availability of services is still compromised even in an urban setting compared to a rural setting, But in terms of patients' ability to be able to get that service closer to home, preventing them to actually going to ED, because we've got the right services and we're connected into those services to provide an ability for a patient to stay at home rather than go many miles to an acute ED, is a clear focus of not only us but also the system. So, you know, that requires investment. It takes, this is the strategy, if you like, and the transformation is real. It's changing the ambulance service to much more of a responsive to need service as opposed to just a transport service. You know, we're moving away from just being a transporter of patients. We are a treater, and we transport if necessary. I hope that's useful.
Thank you. Any other questions from the floor? Anne, sitting next to the microphone.
Yes, with the current proposal that GPs should be able to offer someone an appointment within a fortnight, from my experience, the GPs are using 111 as an extra, or as an excuse not to give people appointments. I think that's probably not helping. And I know it's going to take a very long time to get trainee medics through the process, but there must be a better way of GPs working with the development of these procedures, because I think there's a lot of aspects that they don't pick up, they don't pass on. If they refer someone, they might not know the person they're picking up is blind or in a wheelchair or deaf, which all makes a big difference to, or it has communication, you know, a different language or whatever. If the team don't know that when they get there, it just makes it that more difficult. There must be a better way, somehow, because it'll make everybody's lives easier.
Thank you. A good question. I'm looking to Executive Directors. Stephen, you've got the microphone, so I think you're as good as enemy for that one, I think.
Yeah, and I think one of the fact the GPs are working really, really hard. There simply isn't enough of them to deliver the amount of appointments that are required for the amount of patients trying to access the systems. I think one of the things is, but how many of those patients actually need a GP to solve their problem? Because it could be an urgent treatment centre who can solve the problem if it's an urgent need. It could be a pharmacist who can deal with a prescribing issue. All of those services are tuned into 111. So an awful lot of the time there does seem a question that says, well, if you have an urgent need, and one of it may be a GP appointment is an outcome, do you phone 111 first to then find the solution for you after it? Now, I'll be really honest, that would be a challenge for us with our volumes at the moment. I don't want to encourage more workload, but in terms of a strategy to get the patient what they need as quick as possible, that for me would be a way. So we don't tend to turn that volume away, but I think for the patient, it moves away from the traditional model of you contact your GP for care if it's not of an emergency nature. And that's where, you know, we need to consider that and engage stakeholders to be able to come up with some good decisions around that, rather than just opting for it and not telling patients that's what we're doing. It may be the right thing to do, but let's tell patients that's the thing that they need to do, rather than they're not quite sure, so it becomes we'll just phone 111. Does that make sense? And I think the eligibility side of things that you've described, that follows on from that, because that's around identifying vulnerabilities, having access to patient notes, having access to all of the information where good decisions can be made. And that's what within our clinical assessment service, that's what we're trying to then create there, so that we have all of those aspects dealt with.
Because I think the current algorithms are set nationally, aren't they? As I think it would be nice if it could be sort of shoved up to NHS England or whatever, that there are certain things that could be brought in which would identify disabilities, stuff like that, during that initial set of questions, which might make the sort of follow-on a lot smoother and probably put less stress on staff and patient.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the access to patient notes, and once you get past the initial phase of, yeah, basically the initial, you know, the identification of whether it's life-threatening or not, once you then step into the triage process, at that point, that's where we need to base decisions based on the information that come across. That becomes much more clinical in nature, and you need clinicians with that expertise, and that's why focusing in on the CAS, and one of the slides mentioned around some, we want to work, how do we virtualize, bring in experts into our control room? Because what we really want is mental health practitioners, a GP, an ED consultant, a mental health practitioner, a stroke expert, and a geriatrician. If they were all just sitting on the shoulder of one of our clinicians, well, and a midwife, but I think it's how do we, and this is part of the virtualisation aspects and getting through information governance, all of the things that we're working to get through, is taking us down a very exciting line which will shift how ambulance services work. Now, I'm quite excited about it, but we've got to work that through, and it has to be safe. So yeah, I think it will be interesting to see how that moves forward.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much. I'm going to draw the Q&A session to a close now. Can I just, up on the screen, signpost us to the annual report, the quality report, and the review of the year? They're all available now on the NIAS website. Really good reads, actually. Helen highlighted a number of the things that are in each of those documents earlier on, but certainly worth having a look if you've not already had the opportunity to see them. That then takes us to item 9, which is any other business. It says on my script, by permission of the chairman, and I'm now giving you permission, he says gratuitously, to raise any other business at the annual general meeting and the annual members meeting. No, in which case, can I draw it to a close? Can I say thank you very much again for your attendance, for your insightful questions. I think it shows a really good understanding of the organisation and the operation that we have and some of the challenges. I'd like to thank Helen and Kev for your presentations. I'd also like to thank the support team, including the comms team and the Secretariat, for all the preparation that's gone into this afternoon, and to our colleagues in Gateshead College for hosting us here this afternoon. Final thing to say is please have a safe journey home and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you very much.